Thank you for joining us for the 5th episode of Denver Portal Virtual Programming. Today we have great artists from Denver, Mexico City, and La Paz, Bolivia, who are going to be with us to talk about street art, the personal stories of their work, and the power of art to disrupt mainstream narratives. My name is Gary Stoyer. I am president and CEO of the Bonfils Stanton Foundation in Denver, Colorado. I'll be your moderator. At Bonfils Stanton Foundation, we focus explicitly on arts and culture, and also have a special focus on the connection between the arts and social change, social justice. I should also add, in the past, I used to be the chief cultural officer for the city of Philadelphia, where I also oversaw, as part of that work, its public art program, actually the first % for art program in the country, as well as its very well-known mural arts program. And that also involved bringing the Dutch artist Hassan Han to Philadelphia to do a project called Philly Painting. They had become well-known for doing the favela project in Rio. So anyway, I have a personal connection to murals, to art and social change. So I'm really excited to have the opportunity to moderate this conversation. I'm going to ask each of the artists in turn to introduce themselves and give a little background on their work, the artistic mediums that they work in, and how they began in this connection between murals, public art, street art. So let's start with Andre MX from Mexico City.
Hi there. Well, I remember that when I began my artwork, I was with a broken heart. So the way to work with my emotions was to make a lot of paste up and put it around the city in the places that I was with my ex-boyfriend. So then when the people start to saw this, start to follow me and talk to me about the emotions, about they feel like the same like me. So then I've been studying and I've been traveling a lot, and I start to focus more in projects about, the women. For example, I think that it's me. I always work with that because I think that it's very important to talk about that with other women, because here in Mexico and maybe in Latin America, it's very hard to deal with our bodies, with our skin, because we always have like this thing about capitalism and advertising that you need to be white, for example, and all this time I've been like, I don't know, working a lot about that. And for example, all my models are Mexicans now, because I think that it's very important that, I don't know, all the people can see that this is good, that to be you, to be brown, to be Mexican, to be native is good. So yes, that's my work.
This is my first solo exhibition show. That is, I'm Watching You, and it's in this gallery, Estancia Filial.
Thank you, Andre. Now let's move on to Greg. You're the one of these 3 artists whose work I know, because you're based in Denver and we've had the opportunity to connect quite a bit. So, but for the benefit of all our participants, you talk a bit about your background, which I know is varied and includes lots of different kinds of media.
Yeah, hi. So I'm Gregg Deal. I live in Colorado, been here for about 5 years. And before that was in Washington, D.C., but grew up in Utah. I work in visual arts. I mean, that's what I was trained in, painting. But also really made my bones in performance art, which I've been able to expand throughout my career to include spoken word and some pretty elaborate installations, and of course conceptual work that sort of goes along with that, and of course murals as well. In the 90s, I did a lot of graffiti when that was sort of still underground, but up and coming as being a pretty viable form of art that was just sort of in public. Transferring to a place of street art, sort of working within sanctioned spaces of making art that is done in public. And so that is something that, you know, in the summertime I get to sort of indulge in. It to me is another medium to create work, and in spaces like Denver, really get to sort of disrupt spaces with narratives that are counter, or at least less seen within a lot of those areas and arenas.
Thanks, Greg.
You know, if I put a painting on the wall, you can look at it and you can bring to it, you know, all of your understandings or misunderstandings, all of your, you know, your experiences, your prejudices, like everything to the table. And the painting might be able to give you something to counter those narratives, but oftentimes they don't, you know. So within performance work, I could be doing something and you could see me, you could react to what you're seeing, and I can change what I'm doing in that moment. And so that's power, power over narrative. Native people in general have not had a lot of power in their narratives. So I think that that's one of those things that's like really important, you know, to recognize. It can also be a little shocking too. I like that part too. Sometimes we all need to be shocked. So for this, I'm using this sort of paper process. I'm using paper sort of as a stencil. So I adhere it to the wall with just spray adhesive, just basic spray adhesive. It's a little tedious, but it also gives me like total control.
Next, Knorke, could you talk a bit about how you came to this work and your background?
Okay, hi everybody. My name is Knorke Leaf. I'm an urban artist from Bolivia, transdisciplinary urban artist. I like to call myself because yes, I work with a lot of things at the same time. I'm also an ecofeminist and environmental activist. I have studied art and also specialized in engraving, like Andre. But as in my country, I think my internal searching was how I can get art to be public, how I can get people to get to art, because I have experience already through my university time that people that used to visit art or have a connection with art were only visiting galleries or museums. And for me, that wasn't enough and wasn't helping the reality of my country. So I needed something else and I was searching for it. And one day, yes, I started doing some pasting as well, but talking about political stuff. And I started my first mural when it was a very important march, the March of Indigenous People to defend a special territory in my country that's called Tipnis. And this was really international new because we had already an indigenous president. And this indigenous president wanted to do a big road in the middle of an indigenous territory. So it was a big thing for all the country. And then, yes, I painted my first mural for, it was a cultural night. So everybody can enter how you say this, for free to museums and everything. And yes, I was painting for the first time, and I remember it was at night already. I was finishing my mural, and suddenly I hear, like, I was really abstracting my mural, but suddenly I hear a lot of sound of people out like behind me, and they started to clap. And I was like, I want to see what they are clapping to, you know. And I move back and I see all these people watching the mural and they clapping at the mural because they love it. And for that time, I realized the power of public art of murals, that they can get in touch with so many peoples and at the same time have so many kind of perceptions. And for me, that was the moment when, yes, I realized that this is what I want and this is where I want to be. Yeah.
Thanks, Knorke. And you know, you've all referenced one of the things that I think is really kind of interesting about this area of work, and also sort of an inherent sort of conflict, which is the fact that public art, murals, its roots in, you know, graffiti, street art, was initially sort of mostly unsanctioned, and people and also, you know, an element of it that's about bringing art to the people, putting art into spaces where folks would not otherwise have access to art, as you were saying. There may not be museums in those neighborhoods, and doesn't mean that we have to get folks into museums to experience art. Why can't art be in their neighborhoods? Why can't art be, you know, available to all people? But yet at the same time, we've seen this transition where street art is more and more legitimized, and it's in art galleries, and most murals are now sanctioned, where someone is kind of, you know, authorizing doing that wall. So I think it's just one of the interesting dynamics of this work that I'd like to kind of get to in our conversation. And I'm gonna ask a question of each of you that's specific to your work, but then I think we'll hopefully get into a general conversation. And I would also say, you should each feel free to ask questions of one another too. So even though I'm the moderator, if somebody says something that kind of triggers an idea or thought to you, I think these kinds of conversations are most interesting and engaging when it truly becomes a conversation between all four of us, not just with me one by one asking you questions. But I'm going to start with some specific questions. So Gregg, I know that your latest mural for Crush Walls, which is a big street art festival here in Denver that's going on right now, is part of a kind of theme that you've had of repurposing old comic book images that relate to Native people, colonizers. Maybe you could talk a bit about why that theme resonates with you. And then I know you also are doing a project at Art Students League as well at the same time. So maybe you can talk about both of those, and also why you've also kind of engaged in performance pieces too. That has also become, I think, a really important part of your work.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I mean, I think, well, the theme of all of these works, which I can get into here just a little more specifically, is modern representation, which is a big issue here in the United States. Oftentimes, indigenous people are relegated to sort of a relic, buckskin and headdresses, and so this idea of sort of reclaiming indigenous identity from the public or from American culture or Western culture has been a big part in this. So the painting series that you referenced is called The Others, and it uses comic book images that I've reappropriated from the 40s and 50s, which is sort of a heyday time in sort of popular culture that's like, Boy Scouts and cowboys and Indians and all of those different things that sort of became a really big part in the narrative of Americana. And everything's very stereotypical, and everything is very it's all just problematic now, as we've sort of been able to educate ourselves and see sort of where those things become an issue. I've replaced all of the dialogue in each of those comic series with lyrics from punk rock songs, things that I grew up with that resonate with the indigenous struggle, or at least sort of lean towards that. Last year for Crush, I did a piece. It was of a native person on a horse, and his hatchet's coming down, and there's a red coat, like, doing one of these things. And he's saying, "You're evicted. It's time to leave. It don't matter if you've been here 30 years." And it's a song about gentrification, which is not the same as Indian removal, another big issue that's happened here in the United States throughout history. But a lot of the language is the same. And so sort of correlating those things to be in that space is not only to speak to the indigenous struggle, but the illustrations have been repurposed so that all the natives in them are winning. Which is generally not something that has happened within a lot of those representations, that the natives are the victors, that the natives are all in a position of power, or in a position where they're winning. And that lends itself also to indigenous, indigenous representation. Likewise, the performance and installation that I did for a group in Denver called the Art Student League of Denver, set up essentially a teepee, or a dwelling that is well known in American history as being an indigenous dwelling, particularly and specifically for the Plains natives. But it fits within this stereotype. We graffitied, me and an indigenous friend of mine named JC Biennial, a Navajo friend of mine, we graffitied the outside of the teepee, so it is an urban dwelling. I set up little things like a CCTV camera on the outside of one of the teepee poles. I have an indigenous flag that flies. The space is filled with furniture, like modern furniture, a desk, a bed, a dresser, a bookcase. There's little pieces within the installation that are all tongue-in-cheek, or things that have been created to denote different issues. So like all the books, like the top shelf of the books are all written by native authors that are both fiction and nonfiction. The books on the lower part of the bookshelf are all by white authors about natives, and I have them labeled, the native writers listed as nonfiction, and the non-native writers writing about Indians as fiction, just sort of a statement about who gets to tell our stories. And there's a performance piece that goes with it, and it all is about modern indigenous living, which is also the title of the piece. And so there's an effort to sort of disrupt the sort of status quo of the expectation of native existence. And I think that disrupting that has been a big part. And it seems like a simple thing, but it's really not a simple thing. It's actually quite complicated here in the United States to even have that discussion, because Americans, generally speaking, don't have a frame of reference to what our existence even is outside of cowboys and Indians. And so that plays a big part in the work that I'm creating.
Thanks, Greg. And I think we'll probably get into exploring some of those themes a little bit more deeply. And I think one of the things that's sort of interesting that will come out in this conversation is the different nature of indigenousness and how that plays out in different countries within the Americas, given their history and where they are right now. And Andre, I know that Mexico City is a huge city. Many Americans are not aware of how big Mexico City really is, or really how powerful the role of the arts is in Mexico City. That it has more museums than any other city in the world, except for Paris. And so could you describe a little bit the street art scene in Mexico City in that context? And I also have been told that there's a new law against certain types of street art or graffiti, and maybe you can talk a little bit about the roots of that and kind of how that has had an impact on your work and the work of other artists.
Well, first, for me, I think that the graffiti it's amazing. You know, I love it. Like I make murals, but I began doing graffiti. You know, and illegal. I remember that I went with my friends every night, and we made like letters. You know, and I still love it. But now I think that my work needs a message. You know, because here in Mexico a lot of people don't like it. A lot of people don't see the graffiti like a art. And even the writers, you know, the graffiti writers think that the thing that they do is only illegal and letters and that's it. So I think that it's very important that the people start, I don't know if it start, but maybe see that the graffiti is another way to make art. You know, I think that is art, but I don't know, here in Mexico, I don't know, we need more culture, you know, we need to see more because here in Mexico, a lot of people think that the art is only in museums and galleries, and I don't like it, you know. At the beginning, I remember that I started to do all this thing illegal because it was my way to fight that, you know, that, okay, my art is not going to be in a gallery because I need to be, you know, wild or rebelde, I don't know how to rebel, I don't know if it's okay, but you know, and then I start to see that we need to talk here. We need to talk to about more topics, you know, more hard, more difficult, more importance. For example, now I think that in Mexico we are in a revolution of talk about the women because here we have a lot of problems of violence, but now if you're a woman here, you are in constantly danger. You know, you can be raped, you can be murdered, you can be disappear. So I don't know, I think that the street art is a good way to talk about these problems, you know, because even I think that if you are a woman and you are doing the street art, it's hard because a lot of people, you know, all the artists are men, for example. So for me, it's good to be a woman and travel and do this because I think that I inspire more people. So when I knew about Knorke, for example, I was like really excited because she is like Latina, you know, Latina like me, and she's a woman, and I think that we are doing like something really important to this. I don't know.
Here, for example, is my new mural. The name of this is Ischel. Ischel was the goddess of the fertility. Is this fertilidad? Fertility and beauty, and of course this, how do you say fortaleza? Strength. So for this, I use a Mexican model as well. It's my friend Lenny, and you know, she's a really beautiful woman, Mexican woman. So when I saw her, of course I told her like, hey, do you want to be my model? And she was like so excited that we do as well a performance. So for me, it's my first time doing that because I don't paint, but I think that is very funny when an artist try to do different things, you know? So for me, this is the old work that I've been doing in these 3 years. Here, for example, I did this piece from the Pride in 2019 as well. So I remember that in that festival, I was pasting this on the streets and everyone like was so happy, and I don't know, I inspired me in the love of 2 friends that I have, and they was like, I don't know, so excited as well, you know, because they want to be part of this, they want to create some, ¿cómo se dice? Conciencia, some conscience, and I don't know, I like that. The name of this piece is Love is Free. My inspiration always been like, you know, the intuition and the women and the goddess. And when I started to do this, it was only emotions of myself. But then I started to see that we need to have more this type of message, because a lot of women over the city or over the world think that they don't have this capacity to share or to, how do you say, select, elegir, to choose, their fate, their destiny. So I don't know, my inspiration always is this power of women. I don't know if always I'm going to do this, because I think that, of course, in the world we have like a lot of another topics really important as well. But for this moment, I want to share this sensuality, this power, this good thing to be you if you are a woman. Because here in Mexico, that we have like very hard things. It's a lot of violence for you, and you need to be taken care of you as well. So for me, this is like for the girls that want to be a warrior. So you can be a warrior, you can be an artist, you can be a dancer if you want. And that's it. This is the really important message that I want to share with all the girls.
That's great, and actually you've done a perfect segue for me to Knorke, because I know your work is also focused on women and indigenous women, and maybe you can kind of continue on that thread, and also you referenced the fact that the appeal of street art is the sort of freedom from rules and judgment, and maybe you can talk a little bit about that, about how that medium is what gives you more freedom to express the things that you want to express. And then after you're done, I thought maybe, as long as we're on this theme, I know, Gregg, you have done a piece with your daughter Sage also about the killing of indigenous women here in the US. So maybe after Knorke, you could talk a bit about that piece that you did with Sage.
Okay. Well, I think there are two spaces, but all come together. I think the main piece that reunites our struggles and our passion to paint on the streets is to decolonize. I think decolonization is the key word for us, and also to feel, like Andres said, and also I understand what Gregg talks about, because I have a lot of contact with indigenous women in the north, in Canada, and I understand the past. So for me, yes, I think the streets are the space to decolonize everything, to disobey everything, to reconstruct all the imaginary that people have been taught, that people have been educated for. Our main struggles in Latin America, Bolivia, of course, is, of course, patriarchalism, and of course, extractivism. And both they do the same thing to women's body. They do violence, they reproduce violence. So we cannot paint separating those things, no? It's all connected, and for me, I think a lot of people, it's important to educate in our history, in our words. So that, the way to do that, for example, in terms of talking about feminism and women fights, yes, of course, is to start educating other women, other children, men as well, of course, what means to be a woman on the streets. For me, wasn't easy either. I was, I think, the first woman painting on the streets here, so, and alone, really difficult. So, yes, and I think murals can talk about it, and they don't only talk about, okay, this is our experience, these are our fights, but also this is our voice, this is our power, this is what we want. And I think a mural can create determination as well, and that's good. To say in public things that maybe you can't say in private life. Women can see a mural, and let's say this mural can say, stop raping us, for example. And yes, it's gonna be public, so people can get educated about it, no? And it's the same for environmental issues. Schools don't talk about it. Schools don't talk about extractivism or these political issues. And you have people that get to university and they still don't know all these important and profound issues of political, social systems. So yes, we need to educate. And I think that's, for me, that's the main thing, to be on the streets, to educate together, to create new ideas, to create new ways of talking together. Because it's not only about the artist, for me as well, is to decolonize the concept of what is an art, what is art and what is an artist. And yes, women, we are here. We are part of that process of creation, because as well, the history of art has always invisibilized women. Since the 90s, we are still there on the museums. We are still little by little being more visualized. And so I think it's a huge struggle. And like Andres said, I think it's a historical moment for us as women and also indigenous people. I think it is so important to unite and recreate these fights and understand that this is our right to exist, to create, to recreate, and to have our reality, what we really want. Yes.
Thank you, Knorke. And I teed up Gregg a little bit beforehand, and because I know he's one of those rare male artists who has actually really focused on the mistreatment of Indigenous women. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that thread of your work, Gregg.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, certainly first and foremost, my voice is, I think, less important than the voice of women. And in the United States, it's really difficult because Native women, and in particular, just Native women artists have a difficult time. There's these weird sort of patriarchal things that just exist to keep women who are just really, really prolific in their work getting sort of a fair shake. And so I have 5 kids, which is kind of like having a million kids. But my oldest and my youngest are girls, and my oldest is 14, Sage. And she's been a subject matter in my work from time to time. I mean, in my eyes, she's an Indigenous young lady that I have access to, the most important Indigenous woman in my life, and her sister sort of being right up in that as well. And we've had these discussions. There is a epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous women in North America, and I know that it also exists in Central America and South America. That there's this sort of systemic dehumanization of Native women, brown women, and what that looks like. So I had created this mural in Colorado Springs this year. It stands 77 feet tall, and it is a portrait of Sage, and she's sitting very upright. She has a handprint, a red handprint on her face, which in the States is specifically about missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit, which is sort of our Indigenous way of saying LGBTQ plus. And she's actually wearing a t-shirt for her favorite punk band, which is a nod towards modernism. She's like a modern living young girl. She's not adorned in regalia for that outfit, very specifically for that. And she also has a halo around her head, which is a bit of a nod towards Renaissance paintings, but not towards heaven or death or any of those things that we sort of give weight to, but is a statement of divinity. Divinity in our communities. Our women are divine, our girls are divine, our children are divine, our elders are divine, our Two-Spirit are divine in nature, and in the traditional way we hold these individuals up. And we've been so caught up in survival amidst, the sort of colonial machine that has given us or told us that women have less value than men, that gay or queer have less value than straight, that adults have more value than children. That all of these things are false, that there's inherent value within these things in our communities. And so this piece is meant to be about representation and be about existence and modern existence with a nod towards these social issues that we have. And to put that into Colorado Springs, which is the second most politically conservative city in the country, I think it could be viewed as a pretty bold statement. There's a lot of politicians that work for the city. They're very upset about this piece when this piece doesn't really make any political statement. It's purely social and it's purely cultural statements. But the polarization of those issues, our existence, indigenous existence, is inherently political.
Well, we live in an age now where, like, if anybody who comes from a marginalized community says something that is sort of a counter narrative, that automatically makes them an activist. And the truth is that a lot of the things that I talk about or have talked about are things that sort of affect my everyday, things that affect my family, things that affect my community. And so I don't know, if that's really activism or not. I mean, what one person calls an activist, another might call an adult with an opinion. It just, like, the difference is, like, who has a microphone, who has a platform, who doesn't. And so I'm not sure kind of what I feel about that, but I don't necessarily shy away from it either. I just, as a contemporary artist, and really that's what I am, as a contemporary artist that just happens to be indigenous, I don't think I'm doing anything like that's terribly groundbreaking. I think that I'm creating work that speaks to my experience as an indigenous person in America and things that are important to me within that narrative. And, if that's activism, I guess that's activism, but it's also, within the realm of contemporary art, you're just articulating how you see the world, what you see, what affects you, and that's what you create. You create things that are sort of based on that. And, in this country, I think the novel approach of somebody who's not white saying something, have an opinion, doing something that is perhaps different than what a lot of people have seen, it can oftentimes become commodified. So I'm in this weird place where it's like, yeah, I'm saying something and yeah, it's something different, but I'm also trying to create work that's challenging so that it's harder to commodify, and that still is relevant within the narratives within my own community and for myself, but also relevant, in the United States too. So I think it's a kind of a mixed bag. Art activism has become a thing in the United States. I think it's fully recognized by, power structures, galleries and museums and things that recognize that it's a legitimate movement sort of within the art world. But it's also really difficult because, like, how do you put money behind that, and so that's been a big struggle. I've seen a lot of artists who are sort of doing art and activism. I've seen them come and go because it's hard to get what you need in order to live and to create the work that you want to create. But right now, right this second, I think that a lot of that's also changed. We're having a national discussion on race and ethnicity and equity and all the historical ramifications of that. And I don't know that that's really happened quite the same way. And certainly within a broader conversation, I don't know that it's happened. But it's happening now. And I think that's interesting and exciting. More than anything, I'm, looking forward to seeing what kind of work comes out of it. And what kind of work that can be supported, what kind of work that will challenge me, in my work and what I'm trying to create. I sort of revel in the challenge. So it's kind of an exciting time, while also simultaneously being sort of a disheartening time at this, with everything that's going on. So.
You talked about the political nature of that piece, and you've each talked about the importance of politics and making statements. So maybe you could each sort of talk about the role of environment, indigenousness, social justice, all those things that you try and address through your work. But at the same time, does it become harder to do that through the medium of murals and public art as they become more sort of legitimized, more corporate, more kind of, authorized? So how do you balance being able to do work that challenges, that is dangerous, that is controversial, when to get it done, it has to be funded, you have to get the approval to put it on that wall. So I think it would be interesting if you could each talk a little bit about that tension between the desire of your work to make social change, to challenge people, and the fact that sometimes in that sphere that can be difficult.
Well, street art, urban art, graffiti has something that's so nice that is, you have to try it. And you have to try it. And the beautiful thing about doing public art, it's that for me, for example, is once you do it, you know that that piece is for people. You can expect that piece to be, I don't know, alive for the next 10 years, or you have to, I don't know how to say it in English, but it's desapegarse. You have to
leave it, no?
I don't know how.
Leave it. Desapego, no sé cómo es.
I don't know how to say it in English, desapego, but it means once you do it, you leave it there. So and for me, in terms of political murals or murals that can be really controversial or maybe dangerous, I have to do it and I will see the result after. For example, in Bolivia, we had a lot of problems with Chinese migration to explore protected areas, right? And we started since 5 years ago more and more a big problem with with jaguars. So we have more traffic of jaguars since 5 years ago, and so yes, you can go paint in the street, stop killing our jaguars, stop killing animals for traffic, blah, blah, blah. And yes, at the same time, you're confronting people that has a lot of power. And well, you do it, and I did it. And I don't know how to say this, but I'm still alive, There are some spaces where, yes, it can work and the mural is still there. People love it because it's not only my voice, it's a social demand, but nobody gets the balls to do it, let's say, because you're confronting the president, you're confronting international business. So sometimes it's easy like that story, and sometimes as well, especially in religion things, it's really difficult. I think, yes, people here in Bolivia, in Latin America, they are really conservative, Catholic, Christians. I know that that's also in United States or Canada, but here, yes, if you talk about abortion, for example, it's still a huge thing. You will still have this violent reaction. People will want to destroy you because you talk about, I don't know, the Virgin Maria, something about it, and people will try to destroy you. Even if what you're saying has a point, people don't want to reflect about it. They are just shut. So we have a long way to open that space. Yes, and for urban artists, I think you have to try. Yeah, that's it.
Well, but I think too that that work is collective, I think that when an artist meet another artist that as well have the same topic or maybe want to do the same change, it's good that everyone is more open, you know, because I think that when you put your artwork in the streets and you talk about these topics, abortion, religion, violence, the people don't like it. The people just take away, you know, because sometimes I think that the people don't want to see that reality that is hard to see, that is, I don't know, cruda, no sé, violenta, violent, and I don't know. I think that for me, if I am an artist, I love to meet more people, you know, because I think that the message is more strong. So now that I'm here in Mexico, for example, I met a lot of girls. I don't know if you see that here we take like a building that is like rights, you know, government rights, you know, people, and we take it like all the women. So I remember that I went and I donate some material, but you know, I think that that moment is when you need to do more, you know. O sea, I'm an artist, but as well I need to put my art to try that type of message can be more strong. So I think that the collective thing, that to meet more people that I don't know have the same that you is good, you know. And also I think that is very dangerous as well. Well, here in Mexico, for example, I think that as well the people don't like it, the government don't like it. So I don't know. I think that you need to do more. Like I love to paint, but as well now I'm trying to do more projects. I need to do this message in other ways, because I like the streets, but I think that everything is temporal out there. You know, you don't know how much you want to see your mural, because here in Mexico is fight with the people, fight with the graffiti, and I don't know. It's the same like you is try to let it go. You know, like it's my art, but at the same time it's a street and you don't know how much you're going to see that.
That same attitude is here too. I mean, I just had a discussion with the daughter of a very well-known muralist, Chicano muralist here in Denver, Emmanuel Martinez, and we were discussing the fact that when he was doing murals, when he's doing Chicano murals in Denver, that it was something for the community and that the community owned it and that it had sort of an existence that it was going to be there forever. And I was explaining how now when I do work out in the streets, that I just accept the fact that it's probably going to get tagged on, it's probably going to be destroyed, and at the very least it's going to be buffed over in a year. You know, the work that I did for Crush for this big mural event is a really difficult event because they have 100 artists in a neighborhood that's been heavily gentrified, in a predominantly, or at least a traditionally Black and Latino neighborhood. And they're doing this whole big thing, but like, it's all like white girls in yoga pants and white dudes in flip-flops. Like that's all that's out there. And even half the artists that are participating are sort of in that space. And it's really difficult because, you know, how do you justify that? And like the murals that we're doing now, they're not permanent. They're not part of a community anymore, that it's this sort of guerrilla effort. You come in and you do things and you put stuff up and you accept the fact that somebody's probably going to go over it. And so there's this temporary nature to those things here in the States. And I know that's the case in a lot of cities across the world. But I find that the balance for me is to be completely unapologetic. Like I don't apologize for anything that I do. I create what I create. I say what I say. I have to make sure that my voice is always exactly what it's supposed to be, that it's coming from me, that it's true, that it's right. And if that doesn't resonate with somebody else, it doesn't matter, because representation matters. And here in the US, you know, we're going into this place, you know, kind of nodding towards that environmentalism that you're talking about too, that there is this whole other aspect of letting people know that these are native lands, these are indigenous lands, and that these are stolen lands. And recognition of that, recognition of land, like all of these things are beginning to play a part in sort of helping to raise the consciousness of the public for where we stand and what's happening and why it's happening. And, you know, the myriad of issues that have taken place, from displacing people to displacing animals to displacing you know, plants and spaces that are not only sacred to our people, but also the loss of, you know, trees and the loss of land and grass and all the things that are happening all in the name of sort of progression and development. And so being unapologetic in those statements is a big part in that, which of course comes with it comes with blowback, it comes with danger to a certain degree, it comes with you know, people being upset, but I think we can't ever stop challenging those things, ever.
Thanks, Greg. I think that's a great place to end it. I just want to thank Greg, Andre, Knorke for allowing me to be a part of this conversation, and for your voices, for your work, which is so important in our society right now. This has just been a great conversation, and I thank you. And with that, let's wrap it up.